I'm Megan Skidmore, and welcome to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts on a faith journey and all aspects of life. Join me as I bring this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I firmly believe we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with asking questions and allowing doubts. When we are more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I am thrilled. I always say that at the beginning, but I genuinely mean it. I have a new friend with me today, and Casey, this is really our first time getting to chat virtually or at all.
Yes,
and
I'm excited.
I'm so happy to hear that. And like I said before hitting the record button, I really appreciate you being willing to dive into this and being game to talk about something that I have found is an integral part of my faith journey, and that is just allowing doubt and even leaning into it and allowing all the questions, just not making it mean anything negative or shameful or bad, any of those things, that it's truly a part of our journeys. And so I believe some of your content was shared to somebody's story that I follow, and that's how I found you.
Yeah.
I can't remember who shared it, but it was a reel that you posted. You actually have several accounts, and I'll leave the links in the show notes for them so folks can connect with you. But it was at Casey McFarland Photo. It was at that Instagram account.
Yeah.
And you talk about the necessity of doubt, how you called it a catalyst into the next stage in your faith journey. We can get to that in a little bit. But I saw that and I was immediately gravitated toward that. I'm like, yes, I feel the same. So anyway, and you're also you're enrolled, I guess you could say, in the Living School. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. But before I get way ahead of myself, I want to give you the time to introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell us about your background and, your upbringing, family, profession, all the things that are, pertinent to your story, and kind of how you got to this space of your other account. I'll have to find
Pioneering Paradox is that.
Pioneering Paradox. Yes. So
yeah. Do you want to get right into it?
Absolutely. Share.
Okay.
Let us know your origin
Thanks
story.
for having me on, first of all. I've really, really loved your content. I think it's very clear and direct and very helpful. I just shared it today on my Pioneering Paradox account because I think it would be so helpful for so many people.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that's a good way to start, is I do have separate accounts. I have a Pioneering Paradox account that I've kind of primarily used for talking about faith. I tried to couple that with my photography account. I've been a career photographer for the last 23 years. I do a lot of stuff out of the country. And I own a tour company. So I have a few different things. We spent about 2 months out of the year in Italy. That's my other account, which is McFarland Tours. And so that's why it's so hard. I'm like I got all these interests in these things. And I'm like, some people, I'm trying to combine them, but it's really hard. So, but anyway, I've been a career photographer since the year 2000. I started with film right after I got married, and I chased my wife we met down at Snow College in central Utah, in Ephraim, Utah. We met within 2 hours of living down there, and she was my cousin's roommate, and we just kind of hit it off and both went on missions and came back. And I loved where she lived so much up in this valley, in Cache Valley, so much that I chased her up here, and we've kind of pretty much lived up here ever since. We've got 4 kids. We've got a 21-year-old, a girl. We got three girls and one boy, and the boy's 17, getting ready to graduate. Two older daughters, one down at Snow College, and one moved out, and then younger, the one that's 13. So it's a
Okay.
lot of fun. We're kind of moving into a little bit of losing some of the kids out of the home, and it's been a little bit bizarre, but we're having fun. So
I'm right there. I get it.
yeah, we just got back from a tour to Italy just like 3 days ago, so we're just kind of getting back to reality right now.
Jet lag is worn off.
Yeah, pretty much doing good. It's the food that adds the adjustment. I have to eat normal again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I grew up in Arizona. I grew up for a part of, I heard you did too, I think a little bit. I was down in
Yeah,
Mesa.
I did.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then Utah. We as a family we lived in Guatemala for a little bit right before COVID. And we're a travel family. We've been to
Hmm.
close to 40 different countries and just really love to travel and explore and we're kind of bounce around. We've been to probably 50 different churches as a family, just exploring
Do you
things.
mean different buildings like chapels of the LDS faith,
Oh,
or you mean
oh, like
churches like
everything from
denominations? Oh,
Islam
nice.
to Hindu to Scientology to Christian Science to
Ah,
yelling holy rollers, all the stuff. So it was just kind of
I love that so much. That
that
is
was
way cool.
that was part of how I dealt with going through a faith change. Like, I still attend the Latter-day Saint community, but that was part of how I was dealing with it, was like going, didn't feel comfortable right then going to church. And so I'm like, let's do something. I want to make this useful. So we did a lot of that. And then,
I love that.
yeah.
So, yeah, I would love to hear more about, you talked about visiting visiting all these different denominations was really
Mhm.
helpful for you as you were going through a faith change. Can you
Yeah.
share a little bit more about that, when that happened, what was
Yeah.
going on for you, what
Yeah.
kind
I
of
think
catalyst for it was?
for sure. I think that's an integral part of our story because
Uh-huh.
both my wife and I, like I was having speaking of doubt, I was having some doubts starting in 2006. I was starting to have some questions and not having tools to
Hmm.
navigate some of these things. Back then, especially there was very little
Yeah,
communication and
very.
resources. And frankly,
We didn't have social media like we do. Not
no,
then.
and part of the
It
reason
was
why
embryonic.
I'm so adamant about talking about these things is because I spent 8 years in doubt, like without telling my wife. I
Mhm.
just afraid that I was going to burst her bubble with some of my questions, afraid, what would it do for our relationship? All the fears that happen with doubt, especially during that time period. So over time, I was just on my own. I had one friend that I communicated with some of my doubts, and he was in the bishopric, and his wife had struggled, and I didn't even know that. But so I had a friend that I could confide in, and then it's so helpful when you're going through that to have somebody to talk to that you don't feel crazy,
Yeah.
or because feeling
Yeah,
crazy is really a problem with just like going, why am I feeling this way? I feel so alone and nuts. I'm crazy, right? And
for sure.
and the truth is that my wife at a certain point ended up kind of struggling. I did kind of confide in her, and it did cause a little bit of a catalyst for
Uh-huh.
her as well. And so, there's things here, but during this time, it was about 2015, both of us were kind of going, all right, whoa, we don't know what to do and how to raise a family if we don't know what we're doing. Like, it just felt completely confused. Like when you're kind of going through some faith changes, going, I've never had this modeled, never seen it done. But my thought process was all of our family, because there was a time period there where I was completely checked out and I was planning an exit strategy for the family. Like we were like, and my wife's like there with pom poms saying, let's get this done. And I had a moment where I was sitting on my couch, like literally looking at real estate at different places and trying to find a place to move entirely away and start fresh. And I had this moment where I had this kind of, I don't want to call it a vision, but a visual of like this massive house. I had kind of felt like I needed, because of my doubts, I had needed to wipe away this Mormon house that I had built with, that I kept trying to repair and kept trying to do everything.
Mhm.
And the reality is that I kind of had this visual of this massive, really big house kind of being lowered over the top of that
Oh my
Mormon
God.
house that I had built. And it was like, oh, I don't have to throw away, I don't have to completely wipe away this Mormon house. I just need an expansion here. Like God
Mhm.
needs to be bigger in my from for me.
Mhm.
Like because was doing a lot of traveling and expanding my thought process and how and I was really struggling with a God that was stuck inside of a classroom or something, So it just
Mhm.
needed expansion. But as part the reason why we started, like I was watching a lot of friends leave the church and I was going, I don't want I want my children to appreciate this heritage. I want my children to appreciate their grandparents and their family who are still very orthodox in this community. I want them to respect their grandparents and everything, even while we were in the middle of like having some what we're looking at as deconstruction to a certain degree. So my thought process was rather than be negative during that time period and be like, hey, we don't do this anymore or whatever, it was like, let's just I hate to say it this way, but my thought process was to dilute the message to a little bit. Like, let's go out and explore all these different churches and just show how many good people there are in the world, learn from these other communities. And frankly, those other communities were what kind of helped me appreciate my own heritage again. Because I did a 6-month Buddhist retreat with Noah Rasheta, and it was I don't know if you know him, but he has a podcast called Secular Buddhism. And I was like, oh man, I was kind of looking at Buddhism going, I'm seeing some of the same language just written differently. Like I started to kind of like be, the concept in Buddhism of non-attachment or something. I started looking, this is kind of what we do when we accept a calling in our church, where we just kind of we don't get attached. We just say, yeah, we'll do that, or we get a mission call or whatever. It's a very Buddhist practice from my perspective to accept a mission call and just not be attached to the outcome. It's quite rare. It's quite interesting that somebody's willing
Yeah.
to give up 2 years, year and a half to 2 years of their life, not knowing where they're going to go. So I started kind of going to the Baptists. I felt like the Baptists helped me learn about grace. I felt like we learned about faith through Christian Science, not to be miscommunicated. It's not Scientology. Christian Science is very miracle faith based. It's quite fascinating. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I mean, we were in a church in Phoenix. It was a black church, and it was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the day before. And we walk in, and the entire congregation stood up and turned around and faced my family and opened their arms and said, in unison, we welcome you to our church and to our community with open arms. It was,
Wow.
I mean, there's the
That is
things we learn.
beautiful.
Yeah. And even after all that, my daughter decided to go on a mission. She went on a mission to Oregon, and so we have a just kind of an unorthodox relationship with all this, but it's like I don't know. Anyway, so we experienced a lot of things, and we still do. My wife and I are one of the things we love taking people to are holy sites, and we do that a lot in Italy and
Ah, okay. So
it just
that's where the tours come in.
yeah. So, and
Oh,
I served a
okay.
mission in Italy, so I speak the language. I have a lot of connections, and it's not just holy, but it's a lot of food and stuff too. But the holy sites are very important to us.
For
We're
sure.
very anyway. So I tried to use my doubt as a catalyst towards something positive, which is not I haven't always done that, but I tried to. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I see so much positive in what you're sharing. I very much feel I have been going through a faith expansion. When I finally kind of found that word in the beginning, I found a lot of folks, especially during the pandemic, a lot of questions really started to come up. I could say that now in hindsight. I don't know that, like you say, people don't necessarily talk about this. That's why I feel strongly about
Yeah.
having these conversations.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, in the beginning, calling it a faith crisis never really resonated with me. To me, that denoted that something had gone wrong, like
Yeah.
horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, my child coming out as queer that really sent me on a pivot in my faith journey. And so
Yeah.
faith expansion really landed for me.
I love that. I heard that on your podcast, and I thought that is a beautiful phraseology for that experience. And
And it goes along so well with this vision of this massive house that you had. I mean, that's so beautiful. Like you're keeping what you gained from that original home, right?
Yeah, do you know what
You're,
the thing that really was a catalyst for that for me was reading the book The Dark Side of the Light Chasers and understanding the concept that Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, talked about the shadow and how what I was seeing happening was a lot of people leave the faith and just take that same thing and move to it and just to a different shell. So we actually attended for a little while, and I have nothing. I don't want to like I have nothing. People are in different stages, but we attended for a while. My wife wanted to go to this place. It was kind of an ex-Mormon place where we were watching people who had left the faith, and I didn't, and I actually had to have a confrontation with one of them because I'm like, I can't bring my kids here. It was so, I just felt like they took some of the same judgments that
um,
they didn't want and
right.
were moving it to a different shell. Not everybody does that, but that was certainly the case
Mm,
that was happening at that time. And I didn't want to move just to a different shell. I wanted to
right.
know what it is. Why am I having doubts? Why, and you go over this really well in your the thought process you talk about in your podcast. Why am I having doubts? What is going on? But the shadow concept was this part of me where I'm going, I had this realization that trying to remove the Mormon part of me was like, in my mind, I was like, it's like Elder Uchtdorf trying to get rid of a German accent. Like
Yeah.
it's it's not something that is possible. In
Right.
fact, one of the things we talk about in the living school is that you will never get rid of that. So rather than try to fight and push, the concept of the shadow is that you try to hide and these dark parts that you don't like about yourself anymore. And you're like putting the best analogy is you got all these beach balls and you're trying to push them underneath in a swimming pool and you're trying to hold them underwater, but they surface, they pop up. So no matter how much you're trying to hide this part of
Mhm.
yourself that you don't like anymore, it's still there. So my thought process
Um,
was understanding that. I actually was like, okay, I had this moment where I was like, I'm going to go back to church and I'm going to sit in sacrament meeting week after week until I can understand why these people are bugging me so bad. Because the shadow concept is that whatever you don't like in other people is something you usually don't like in yourself. And so I'm going, there's something that's bugging me. And what was bugging me was I was going, the judgmentalness, some of the stuff you see in church, in every church, frankly, I'm going, that's me. That's who I am. And rather than just go, that's not me, I just go, no, that's who I am. That's who I've maybe was or whatever, you know? And I felt like I needed to really investigate that shadow part of me and embrace the wholeness of it, those parts of me again to a certain
mhm.
extent. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's making it,
Yeah, I
but
think so. The reason the shadow is there is because there's light and
yeah,
it's not void behind that shadow. There is something there.
yeah.
Um and that's not a bad thing. I just think that we have viewed it kind of in a negative way for a long time.
Yeah.
But I see that evolving. I'm hopeful that it's evolving.
Yeah, because frankly, if you take the word like integrity, the root word is integer, and which means
Mhm.
it's a whole number. You have to like, to me, I had to embrace all of myself, including that heritage of mine. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does. Like if you studied a little bit about epigenetics, literally Mormonism is in your DNA, especially like I go 6 generations back, 6 to 7.
100%.
Like
Yep. Yep.
and it literally is passed down. And the best way I've learned to I'm very visual. And so this is I'm non-scientific,
Yeah.
totally layperson terms, but in the same way that, I have brown eyes and dark brown hair,
Hmm.
um, I have kind of olive complexion. Those are characteristics that were passed down to me through my DNA
Yeah.
from my forebears, right?
Yeah.
And those are obvious because we can see them with the naked eye.
Yep.
But there's other characteristics that are passed down to us from our forebears
Yeah.
that aren't so obvious because they're internal, like our emotional and mental characteristics, our
Yep.
spiritual. I really believe that is a thing. And so it makes so much sense that I believe it's healthier to try to, like you said, integrate. And that's why this idea of expansion just made so much more sense and brought so much more peace
Yeah.
to me.
I 100% agree. And I would say even for some people, because I know some people, I believe it is healthy for some people that the church can be toxic for them. It can be a place where they need to go and they
Yes.
need to explore and go to a different direction. But
Agreed. Agreed.
even in that case, I think at some point we have to come to a grips and still embrace that part of us. Even if
Hmm.
somebody leaves, I still think that that's part of the integrity that we're talking about here. And
Yeah, I
that's
really liked how you pointed that out.
anyway, so I totally agree with you. Yeah.
And to your point, when you mentioned you had visited a sect or a group that had primarily those that had left the Mormon church, I feel similarly. I don't want more of the same. I don't want to go and do something and just the reverse of what, I
Yeah.
feel I'm not making any sense. I don't want to leave and then harbor negative, hateful, spiteful feelings. And
Yeah.
again, that is not to diminish the real and lived experience of
Yeah.
some. I know for many who identify, my space is with LGBTQ plus families, and for many of them, it is not a healthy place. The messages that they are receiving do not contribute to positive, expansive mental health. Some people, they can. And that's where it just comes down to tapping into your own integrity. Well, integrity, yes, but intuition, and then heeding that,
I,
listening to it.
I think this is, when you were talking about how my original post that
Yeah.
doubt is a catalyst,
Yes.
I think that's a good way to segue into that because, and in fact, in your first episode of your podcast, you make reference to Brian McLaren and
Yes.
Faith After Doubt. You can't recommend that book enough. He's one of
I
the men.
know. So good.
Yeah, he's one of the mentors at the Living School, and it's really been good. But there's a lot of different models for these different stages of faith that we have. There's quite a few of them, and I love
Uh-huh.
how Richard Rohr talks about how every model is not true, but it can point us into, it can be helpful, right? And these stages of faith things. One of the things that Brian McLaren pointed me on to that I was making reference to this is that every stage of faith is preceded by a doubt. Like it is a doubt is what causes somebody to move to a different stage of faith. And I say that because one of the stages of faith is perplexity. And perplexity is the stage where somebody comes into their own authority and says, this isn't
Mm-hmm.
helping me, or this is, or
Mm-hmm.
and that's a stage where it can be very confusing and difficult for somebody where they go, okay, I'm having a moment of like going questioning a lot of the things I was told growing up, and that's often caused by sometimes a loved one,
Right.
or something that happens in your life. For me, it was reading some stuff that was different than the expectation I had with my church history and that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
So, but I say that because I think in the Latter-day Saint community, I was thinking about this in terms of the church as a whole has had to go through these same stages of faith. In fact, I
Ooh, I
think
like that.
that to me, the time period where we left Nauvoo and Iowa and all that stuff, and we went to Salt Lake was a stage of perplexity. It was a stage where of finding ourselves, almost like a teenager. I hate to say put it this way, but think of it like
No,
America, kind of
that makes sense. Yeah.
and we're going off to find and frankly, that's when some of the weird things happen, like polygamy and some of these things where we're just like in exploration, setting ourselves up as our own authority and saying we are our own authority over here, and we need this time and this space to be able to be who we need to be. Now, over
That
time,
is fascinating. I
become,
like
yeah. And you think of it in terms of a stage of
how.
faith, and you go, now the problem is that some of the stages of faith that we deal with now, like, okay, so simplicity is the first stage of faith, and that's good
Yes.
versus evil, bad,
Mhm.
bad, good. Well, we still
Right.
have a lot of
Versus wrong.
people who look back at polygamy and go, from a simplistic perspective and go, no, that was right. And it, you know, da 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 da. And I look at it and I go, no, that was a stage of faith. That was to a certain degree the 19, 20-year-old kid going into the military and being in Korea or something and getting a tattoo on his arm and then going, oh crap, you know, 10 years later going, why did I get that tattoo? Like
Yeah.
it was a discovery process. This is my perspective.
Really
But
interesting.
eventually we moved out of that and we moved into the last stage of faith, and we're still working on this, but we moved into more of a into harmony. Harmony is the last
Yeah.
stage of faith, and that's where we started going.
Mhm.
It wasn't until the 1930s in the church where David, some David O. McKay and some of these people come in and start going, we want to get along with our neighbors. We want to not just be off isolated in our own little planet. We actually want to get along. And then we almost kind of flipped the switch and became uber American. So we have tried to be in harmony with the United States ever since that time period, almost sometimes to a fault. So I think that if, now the church as a whole, when we are dealing with these stages of faith, we are still, the church has been able to do some of these stages of faith, but its members are still not fully allowed to go into perplexity as easily as we have done as an institution, if that makes sense.
I think so.
So I'm sorry, this is getting a little complex, but I'll kind of precede it by saying that the first two stages of faith, the church does really, really well.
Yes.
That's like teaching people and teaching kids how to know right and wrong and to know good from evil and bad. And,
Right.
that's how we look at everything during those
Or
stages.
like how Richard Rohr calls it the first half of life. They do that half
That is
very well.
exactly the first half of life, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
without you have to have those first two stages. If you don't do those well in the beginning of your life, then you see this happen with people having to do it again in the later part of their life. So you see a kid who has a lot of trouble in their teens and gets on drugs or something like that. And then they come back full throttle, engaged in the church later on when they're in their 30s or 40s. And it's because they're kind of going through those first stages of faith. Even they double down sometimes on those first two stages of faith. And does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Keep going. Yeah.
It's like my friend's dad was a really troubled kid, and then in his 30s, he was an alcoholic and he did all this stuff when he was young, and then he came out of that, and now he's like an uber defender of right and wrong inside of the church, and he's very dogmatic and very stage one, stage two,
Mhm.
his faith, right? And
Yeah.
so he doesn't have very much tolerance because those two stages don't have a lot of tolerance for,
Yeah.
hippies
Yeah.
or whatever it is, right?
Right. For
Tell me if I'm
variation
getting too
or for
complex.
things that don't
Yeah.
look like you do. Yeah.
But where doubt comes in is when you're in complexity, and we're in this kind of stage where complexity is stage two, where you're kind of going within the institution. I'm finding my own self. I'm finding that I have maybe a little different ideas from the prophet or something like that, but I'm still a part of the group of people. And I'm like just realizing I'm finding myself within the tribe. That's so important for human development.
It is.
Perplexity happens, and this is what's happening with doubt in our era now, is when they go, okay, well, I'm found myself within that, but a catalyst happens, something that creates doubt and pushes somebody into perplexity. In your case, your child comes out as gay or something like that, right? And it goes,
Fair.
well, now that does not fit within the first two stages of faith. So what that causes this really perplexed reaction. And that is caused by doubt. And what happened to us during the polygamy era that created that doubt was the government coming in and saying, we're going to take and freeze all of your assets. We're going to take away the temple. We're going to take away all of your assets. And it caused Wilford Woodruff to go, I'm doubting my position here. And he chose the church to keep the church instead of keep polygamy. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
But this is what's happening on a minor scale within humans moving into perplexity. The challenge is the church doesn't have very many tools to help people in perplexity, nor does it. And what you're talking about is like is making doubt and understanding that in order to get to
Right.
harmony, you first have to go through perplexity.
You do.
And that
And
harmony is so important, right?
it is. And such a key part of the perplexity piece. You're right. There aren't a lot of tools to navigate that stage of faith. And add to that, we're not really encouraged to differentiate
Yes.
our identity from kind of the mainstream belief. And there's a lot of, I'll just, shame. There's a lot of otherness that is attached to that when you do start to try to differentiate yourself. And that includes your opinions, your beliefs, and your own lived experience. When your own lived experience differentiates from quote unquote the norm. I don't believe there is a norm, but yeah, there.
Yeah. And what I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I are on the same page of going, all right, what we want is a healthier stage 3, stage 4 for people who are moving into perplexity
Yeah.
rather than freaking out and saying this is the worst thing that could ever happen.
Yes.
We say, no, this stage of perplexity, whether
Is
somebody
actually.
decides to stay in the church or out, is the step that somebody needs to go towards harmony.
Yes. And
Towards
I want less focus, well, ideally, less focus on whether a person is quote unquote in or out of the church, because honestly, there's so much, that's a spectrum. There's so much there that goes into that. Like, I don't know that you can really classify somebody as completely in, unless they self-define that way, right? But
yes,
instead of, I guess it's not that I don't acknowledge that that exists. It's more like, can we just switch our focus to concepts, to principles, to experience, to the individuals, to what's going on for them, and at the end of the day, about love
yeah,
and godly love and Christ-like love
yeah.
and the divine within each of us.
100%. I have a theory about why so many people are getting thrown into perplexity. Do you want to hear it or?
Oh, yes, of course. Throw it out there.
My thought process is, and this actually kind of helps me to have a little empathy and a little sympathy for church leaders and the church or something like that, because as you recall growing up, the church really was everything to us. It was our entire, right?
It was the entire world. Yes.
Right. Our children and us in the last 20 years, 25 years almost, we got exposed to an entire, we have little by little, without really even thinking about it, been exposed to some of the world's, we've been exposed to the world. We've been exposed through the internet to so
Yeah.
many different ideas that we didn't have when we were young people.
That seemed so distant and far away or
Or
didn't even
like,
know
yeah,
existed.
and we could get away with saying, those people are not happy and the only happy people are, and that was not that
Yeah, true.
every church I've been to says the same thing. Every church I've been to says we're a peculiar people. Well, we all are learning at the Living School. There's people coming from all different faith traditions. At the Living School, everybody realized we're not so peculiar. Like did I say peculiar or particular? I don't know. But we have this kind of idea that we're a peculiar people, but the internet helped us understand we're not so peculiar. Like we're just human.
I
And
think what it did is it showed us we're a whole lot more alike than
yes,
we are different.
yes. And if we think in terms of the very last stage of faith that Brian McLaren is talking about is harmony. And
Hmm.
part of that is understanding and inclusion of other faith traditions
Yeah,
and understanding that these people are having a very similar experience to us. We're not choosing between, it's not like a Lamanite Nephite choosing between good and evil.
right.
Kids are now, and us as humans, I remember Neil A. Maxwell came and spoke to a regional conference when I was like 20 years ago. And he said, most of the decisions we have to make are between prime A and prime B. They're not between
Yeah.
good and evil.
Yeah,
Kids
they're
are
too
not
good and
choosing
good.
to go and like become flesh eating uh
Yeah.
terrible people with, there's exceptions of that, but most
If
kids,
I can, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, the one of the biggest reasons kids are struggling with it are going, I have to choose between the church and
Mhm.
my LGBTQ
Right.
brother or myself or whatever. And those are two choices that we are really difficult
That nobody wants to make.
they want to,
So
and that's
I just wanted,
perplexing. Yeah.
that is perplexity. And I just wanted to add to the idea you expressed regarding harmony, how it includes those of other faiths. This isn't something I don't believe I've said out loud on my podcast yet. For me, that description that you just painted right there goes right along with this idea of missionary work that is so important to the LDS faith. If you're looking at missionary work for what it really is, it's supposed to include everyone, right? You're sharing the good news with everyone. Perhaps the missing piece is they also may have some good news to share and that we can also benefit from or learn from or grow from, etc. But to me, this idea of having good be found in other faiths, it just it makes sense to me, and it resonates with me, and it actually aligns with this idea that, Christ's gospel is for everyone.
I think you're defining the next stage of faith that the church is going to go through, that we're beginning to go through, because in some ways we've been kind of in an adolescent phase. And
Mm-hmm.
the adolescents are always, I know I'm right, I'm whatever. And we're kind of opening up and going,
Mm.
maybe we don't have, we're starting to lose some of that language and go, maybe we have something to learn, because that's humility. Humility is like,
Wow.
when my daughter went on her mission, I said, if you're just telling people things, you will not get a fraction of what you could get if you listened. Like
Mm.
most of what I learned in Italy was like opening and just like, tell me your story, open up, like, and
Yeah.
I can say I really feel like I gained a lot more from people than I got on my mission.
Mhm.
And but part of my struggle was when I grew up in the first stages of faith, you and I grew up thinking we were the entire puzzle.
Yeah.
We are
It's
and
true.
then people have little fractions, but we have the entire puzzle. I think we're coming into a realization that because of the information age we're dealing with, that I actually wanted to throw the whole puzzle out into the garbage. And then part of my perplexity was part of the stage of perplexity moving into harmony, which I haven't fully done. I bump in and out of all these stages.
Yep.
But
Yep.
part of it is doubting that you're right, that the church is all bad. So again, doubt is again,
Yeah.
maybe there are things we should doubt, and doubting the anger, doubting the frustration, and doubting some of these things allowed me to move into a place where I went, actually, you know what? I think we are a beautiful piece of the puzzle.
Hmm.
We're not
I
the
really
whole
like how
puzzle.
you said that. I really like how you said that. Yeah.
And
To make
that allowed
space
me
for ourselves for all of it.
that allowed me to embrace and go, the Latter-day Saint community has something beautiful to offer to the world. And we have a lot to learn from other communities.
Yes. Yes.
And that is moving into more of a harmonic place. But once
Yeah.
again, I had a moment, like literally, when I was in the height of anger, because got really angry and feeling like I was betrayed and lied to, and all these different feelings that come along
Yeah.
with grief.
And I'll be the first to say, allow those phases, allow yourself to feel it, allow yourself to go through all of it.
Yes. But it was doubt that created, and I go, maybe there's a better, I can't stay here forever. You don't want to stay in
Yeah.
perplexity forever. And Richard Rohr talks about how so many people choose to remain in perplexity. It feeds the ego to constantly be angry and be right and be all these different things.
Mhm.
But harmony is like moving into a place where you are able to maintain your own authority, but also give people the benefit of the doubt and go, these guys are trying, and find the good and all the, and part of that inclusivity also means including the people who raised us. Because what
True.
happened
Very
is
true.
That's one thing Buddhism taught me when I was sitting here
It's
going, I'm
true.
trying to run away from Mormonism, and Buddhism is like telling you, hey, we're all one. And I'm going, well, the very people I don't want to be a part of anymore are the biggest learning ground for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
speak
You,
else, but for me, that was my story. And
mhm.
anyway,
You're talking about this perplexity, this stage that seems to be happening broadly. And it made me think of an interview I did that published in the beginning of March with ESA Purcell. He is a graduate student, actually at ASU, majoring in choral performance. But he, as a musician, talked about this idea of dissonance, and there's certain chords that cause this feeling of they don't necessarily sound beautiful and harmonious, but they signify a transition, a moment of pause,
yeah,
and they feel discomfort. You feel discomfort or ill at ease as you hear them. But the natural follow up to that is the harmony, the chords, the conclusion,
yeah,
the finality of the piece. And that's what struck me as you were talking about this great symphony that we're all a part of right now. There are a lot of discords being
yeah.
played or coming about. And yeah, you go back and forth sometimes between the perplexity and the harmony. I can totally see that. And I love this idea that you're bringing into from Buddhism of we're all one whole, and I feel that too. I haven't heard it expressed in that way yet, but that resonates with me 100%.
Well, and imagine like when, the hardest people we have to deal with is like one of the biggest struggles we have sometimes is going back to Thanksgiving dinner and just sitting down with our parents and blah, blah, blah. Because the reason why sometimes we have friction with our parents is because we're so much like them. And we're reminded face to face sometimes with the things that are like, oh, my dad does that. And that's where I
Yeah.
got it from. And I hate that in myself. And sometimes that's the thing we have even with our children, we go, oh, my kid's acting just
Mhm.
like me. And I hate that about myself. That is breeding, that is the gold. That area right there is the gold of the shadow, is going into those areas and go, the things I hate about myself, I need to
Mhm.
love those parts of me. And that's why I think it's so fruitful. It has been for me. I can't say for everybody. I needed
Mhm.
time, I needed space to move away from church, and I still take that time. But
Yeah.
I also like to go and be confronted with a mirror of people, of saints who I learn from and go, oh yeah, I can. Why is that person bugging me? And
That's
it's
so
really
true.
a moment for me to go, oh, it's because of something I don't like in myself. And
It is a
so
mirror. Mhm.
yeah, and so this concept of doubt, like one of the things you're talking about, like with my kids, I've had my kids go through faith crises, and I think one of the hardest parts that I dealt with, and maybe somebody needs to hear this, was when I confronted my parents or my leaders about my doubts. The responses I got were so fearful and
On their end.
on their end. And so it really, that's what destabilized me more than anything. I
Mhm.
was like going,
Mhm.
whoa, these guys don't have the spiritual maybe capacity to withstand a question. That really threw me for a loop.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was so destabilizing that my spiritual leaders could not handle a question, that was the number one reason I was like, I have to leave. Like if they can't handle
I
this,
think
yeah.
in some ways it sends you back maybe to a similar stage and a faith. But
Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. I actually like to talk a little bit about how that is, when we try to express these doubts, try to bring them up in, I'll just use mixed company, whether that's in a faith community, in a Sunday school class on a Sunday, or in other group settings, or family settings or whatever. It is hard to bring
Mhm.
up, you know.
So I have a rule, and when I'm in elders quorum,
Okay.
I actually have an Apple Watch, and I check my heart rate before I say anything.
Okay.
I, that's from experience where I would just like, and I get to say something, and I was like, and
Yeah.
really the whole thing is that this is the fascinating part of this whole stages of faith is when we are in duality of right and wrong. we're in stage 1, stage 2. So even though like we're progressing along these stages, when I go to church, I'm going, no, they're saying that wrong. They're not getting history right. They're not doing whatever.
Mm,
I throw myself right back into stage 1, stage 2.
yeah.
So rather than just being like I'm in which is hard, so hard because you want to get things right for the next generation and all these different things, whatever that means. But yeah, talking with company, I don't know. Some people I just don't even have conversations with. We don't, some people we just don't go there.
That's a valid answer. I mean,
It took
we
me a
have to
while
know.
to get to the place where I felt comfortable enough with myself not to feel like I needed a validation from somebody.
Yeah.
That's not
I,
easy.
I think that's wise.
We are tribal people, like
Yeah.
evolutionarily. So wanting to belong and be heard from our own tribe is so important. I don't care what anybody says. You'll
Yeah.
never, ever, we will always want some form of validation. It's why I do my Instagram account. I
Yeah.
want to be helpful, but I also want to be a part of the community and be a part of the tribe still. Like,
Yeah.
I
I
want to
get
be,
that. I
oh,
totally get that. That's one of the reasons I do
yeah.
this. I absolutely agree. We are very tribal, very much in need of that feeling of community. I have appreciated your time so very much today. One question I like to ask all of my guests to kind of wrap up is, what does it mean to you to live beyond the shadow of doubt?
Mm. From a Latter-day Saint theological perspective, that we are literally supposed to inherit all the Father hath. This is kind of our doctrine, is that we will become, we will be able to progress to higher states of being. The only way that that will happen is through doubt. Is doubting every stage. Like you have to, like, one of the things that I think has happened is at every stage we have to doubt the how small we made God in order to progress into a higher way of living. So I see as living beyond the shadow of doubt is like running towards bigger questions, not away from them.
Ooh, I
I
like
not
that.
only that, but I want to, like, because listen, we have explored more of the this is science. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but from what I understand, we've explored more of the surface of the moon than we have the ocean. Like I think there's only 5% of the ocean has been explored. We're discovering
Oh,
God's creations and how big and how vast this world and this universe is, that the only way we're going to expand is through doubting the stage we're in right now
yeah.
and going, you don't know, I think there's something bigger for me. I think there, and this is what I try to tell my kids. And if we try to normalize, like we're talking about, to bring this around, normalizing the conversation and the expectation, at least with my kids, I'm going, yeah, you're gonna doubt. Like if you don't, then you're not
Yeah.
progressing. You're not moving. In
So
fact, I
true.
don't think staying in stage 1 and 2, it's not a big enough gospel. It's not a universal gospel because it's very tribal. It's like
Hmm.
we're the only ones on this planet that have the truth. The only, no,
Hmm.
like doubting that and going, and so moving into further progress. In my mind, I'm going, God's so big, it has to include all of God's children, all of God's creations, all of these different things. So I welcome doubt in my life because I know that it's going to mean growth. And I know that's also probably going to be painful. One of the
Yeah.
things I'm doubting right now, if I'm going to be honest with you, one of the things I'm learning in the living school is my approach. Like I'm trying to, in my mind, so much of our ego creates this illusion that we are doing something. Sometimes we do things just to feed our ego, and that illusion gets shattered. And maybe one way I can put this is that how do I
Hmm.
put this? I guess what I'm trying to say is that we are constantly going to have to doubt the illusions that we create, the stories that we create, because they're,
Yeah.
I think Adam Miller put it really well. His concept of sin was living a small story. And I think when we
Yeah.
doubt that story, we leave room for expansion.
Yeah. That's so true. We're going to have to constantly doubt our illusions in order to leave room for expansion. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. That is a perfect note to end on, Casey. That's beautiful.
I think we ought to link, because maybe I got a little too complex there. I think we ought to link Brian McLaren's 4 Stages of Faith so
For
people
sure.
can read along, because it's a really great model.
It is. I will definitely leave a link, and I have an episode coming out that's going to give an outline of those.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you so, so much for your time and your insight and your story and your wisdom. Wow. It really touched my heart when you shared in the beginning how you kept all of this to yourself for eight years. My heart goes out to you. That is a long time. I'm so glad that more conversations are happening now.
Honestly, Pioneering Paradox for me is my way of simply just making statements and saying, oh, whoever's out there who's struggling with doubt or whatever, it's my kind of plea and cry to say, I spent 8 years in silence. I just want people to know they're not alone, that they're not crazy. There are legitimate reasons for people to struggle, and you're not crazy, That's
so important and so valid, and probably one of the hardest parts of all of this is when you feel alone. So yeah.
Thank you so much for reaching out, and I love what you're doing. It's so important. It's so amazing, and I want to definitely share it more. So
I appreciate that.
We'll continue this conversation.
So I have a few questions I like to throw out to my guests just to get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
Just final questions. I'm looking for one word answers, just really quick. So tell us your favorite book. You've mentioned quite a few already, but if you had a favorite. Lonesome Dove. Okay. Mm-hmm. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Extrovert. Yep.
And do you have a favorite artist?
Caravaggio.
Oh.
I take people to Rome. Can I tell you just really briefly how?
Of course.
I was on a photo shoot in Rome, 2019, and I had just arrived at the Rome airport at 7:30 in the morning, and I was at baggage claim, and my friend went to use the restroom, and somebody came and stood right next to me at baggage claim, 2 feet away. It was just me and this other guy in the whole place. And I look over and I thought to myself, I think that's Michael Stipe, the lead singer of REM. And I'm like, I'm going to regret this if I don't say something. So I said, excuse me, by chance, are you Michael Stipe? And he says, I am.
No way.
And I'm like,
wow.
Okay. I didn't know what to do. So I just put my hand out for a handshake. And he's like, what are you doing in Rome? I'm like, I'm on a photo shoot. And he's like, that's what I'm doing too. And he had a photo. He's kind of does some photography work, and he was doing an exhibit.
That is fantastic.
He said, are you going to see the Caravaggio paintings? And I was like, I didn't even know who it was. I kind of had known a little bit, but I like to say that Michael Stipe introduced me to Caravaggio.
That is fantastic.
And I totally understand what he was talking about and why he was so excited about Caravaggio. But that's my favorite artist.
Now I'm gonna have to dive deeper. That's awesome. What a great story.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Are you a night owl or a morning lark?
Night owl.
And do you do still or carbonated water, or are you diet soda fan?
Ooh, good question. Carbonated water. I have a soda stream. It took me 20 years to gain that appreciation, but I like it, love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you have a celebrity crush?
Penelope Cruz. My wife knows too, so we're good there.
So you're good. Okay. And then the furthest place you've traveled?
Probably Malaysia, Singapore.
Oh, that's on my bucket list. Ooh,
yeah, that's fun. Cool. I think that's probably the furthest. Yeah. Yeah, that was a long flight.
Oh, yeah. We've flown to New Zealand. That was long.
Oh, yeah, that's a stretch.
That was very long.
Yeah.
Well, Casey, it has been a pleasure to get to know you.
Likewise. So much fun. I love what you're doing. Blessings to you. So amazing.
You too.
Keep it up.
You too. I'm so grateful to make this connection. Yeah.
Likewise. Okay. We'll see you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. First Friday's free coaching, a confidential group to bring all the questions, vent frustrations, share fears, express doubts. Navigating a new and uncertain reality is hard enough. Let's remove the worry of judgment from others. In this group, I will help you help yourself so that you can be there for your child, family, loved ones, and for you too. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. You must complete the agreement. Hopeful Spaces is a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. It's a free monthly parent, ally, or caregiver support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. Email chc@dallashopecharities.org for more info. Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com to find this podcast and additional free resources, including the link for a complimentary coaching session. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more, or to send me a DM. Help the podcast grow. Please follow, review, and share with a friend.